There is a moment in every long marriage when one partner discovers what the other is truly willing to sacrifice for them. For Queen Camilla, that moment may have arrived in the summer of 2026, not with a public declaration, not with a ceremony, but with a secret meeting at a private estate in Gloucestershire, and a room being prepared at Buckingham Palace for the man her husband's heir has spent years trying to keep out. King Charles has made his choice, and the palace is still absorbing what that choice means. According to royal broadcaster Ian Pelham Turner, tensions between Charles and the Prince and Princess of Wales have reached what he described as an all-time high. The specific allegation is this: at a recent royal engagement, William and Catherine walked straight past Queen Camilla without curtsying or bowing. No acknowledgement. No formal gesture of respect to the woman who is by title and position the Queen of England. Just two people moving through a room as if she were not there. Charles reportedly saw it, and his response, according to multiple royal commentators now analyzing the sequence of events, was not a quiet conversation or a private rebuke. It was something larger, something that opened a door William had spent years and considerable political capital trying to keep closed, and that announced to anyone paying close enough attention whose side the King of England is on. Before we go deeper into what this conflict has become, what Charles has done, and what it reveals about the future of this family, make sure you subscribe now, because the developments inside this palace are moving faster than most coverage has been able to follow. Begin with the curtsy. The allegation reported by Pelham Turner to the Daily Express is presented as commentary rather than confirmed palace fact, but it fits a pattern of reported coolness between the Waleses and Camilla that has been building for years and that has recently become visible enough for multiple royal commentators to discuss it explicitly. Pelham Turner's words were precise. "I have heard there does not seem to be much family love between Camilla and William and Kate." He described the curtsy incident as a public gesture of defiance. And then he said something that reframed the entire summer of palace drama. Charles will stand wholeheartedly by his wife. Harry coming back is the first sign I feel of his public defiance in return. Read that slowly. In Pelham Turner's account, Charles welcoming Harry back, the cloak and dagger Highgrove meeting the Buckingham Palace room, offer the secret communications summit, was not primarily about a grandfather missing his grandchildren. It was a king defending his wife. It was Charles choosing Camilla visibly and consequentially over the heir whose attitude toward her he will no longer accommodate quietly. To understand why that framing carries the weight it does, you have to understand what Camilla's position inside this family has always been, and what it costs her every day that William sits one step closer to the throne. Camilla Parker Bowles married Prince Charles in April 2005. By that point, she had spent more than 3 decades as the most controversial figure in the royal family's modern history, the woman the British public blamed, often in the harshest possible terms, for the destruction of the marriage between Charles and Diana. Public opinion toward her was for years brutal. She was booed, photographed in unflattering moments, described in tabloids with language that would not be used for anyone else in public life. The palace managed her public rehabilitation with extraordinary care, step by step, title by title, appearance by appearance, until her designation as Queen Consort at Charles's coronation in 2023 represented the formal completion of a journey that had taken 18 years. And throughout that entire journey, the shadow behind her was not the press. It was William. William lost his mother. That is the irreducible fact at the center of his relationship with Camilla, and no amount of time or diplomatic management has fully resolved it. Diana died in Paris in August 1997 when William was 15 years old. He was at Eton. He was a child. And the woman who had been part of the background of his parents' collapse, whose relationship with his father had been a source of public pain for years before the marriage ended, was now being gradually repositioned as the next queen. The resentment that produced in William has been described by royal sources consistently across years as something he manages rather than something he has overcome. Most people believe he's still harboring a lot of resentment toward her, one insider told Radar Online. The way Camilla betrayed their mother has not been forgotten by either of Diana's children. The same source noted that William is more diplomatic than Harry, meaning he has never published those feelings in a memoir or expressed them to Oprah Winfrey. But diplomatic concealment is not the same as resolution. And in 2024, William stopped concealing it entirely, through at least one specific documented action. When Charles became king in 2022, William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, a royal estate worth more than $1 billion, which had been managed by Charles during his decades as heir. With that inheritance came a number of Charles's long-standing arrangements. One of those arrangements was the employment of Annabel Elliot, Camilla's younger sister, as the duchy's chief interior designer. Elliot had been on the royal payroll since 2005, the year Charles married Camilla. She had earned several £100,000 over those 2 decades working on properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. William removed her from the payroll, quietly, without drama, through the bureaucratic mechanism of not renewing her contract. Sources told The Telegraph that the decision was no reflection on her work. Her contribution to the estates was described as complete, and staff were said to have learned sufficiently from her. No bad blood, no personal animosity, just a future king exercising his authority over his own estate in a way that removed a Camilla family member from a position Charles had created for her. The institutional message was received immediately. William is already showing a ruthless streak, one insider told Radar Online. It's no wonder Charles worries he's unlikely to find a place for Camilla. That observation, Charles worrying about Camilla's future under William, is not peripheral to this story. It is the engine of it. Because Charles is not just a husband choosing his wife over his son in some domestic dispute. He is a king with cancer, who is watching the approach of a succession he cannot control, and whose shape he fears may leave the woman he loves without the protection she needs. He has reportedly assured Camilla that she will continue to have a place within the royal household after his death. But assurances made by a dying king are only as durable as the heir's willingness to honor them. And William's willingness is something Charles has been watching with increasing concern. Radar Online reported that Charles wants William to ensure Camilla remains respected after he ascends the throne. An insider described Charles as feeling that William still harbors resentment toward Camilla, and described the future king's approach as diplomatic in public, while significantly more revealing in private moments. A separate source speaking to the Examiner put it more sharply. William's furious that Camilla seems to care more about promoting herself and protecting her position than she does about protecting Charles. The same source added, William is past the point of even trying to hide his distaste for Camilla. You can see it written all over his face whenever they're in the same room. Those are not palace officials speaking. They are the kind of sources who populate the surrounding coverage of a family conflict that has been building for years. But the pattern they describe William's concealed hostility toward Camilla, Charles's protective instinct toward his wife, the two men operating from fundamentally different emotional positions about the same woman, is consistent across enough outlets and enough commentators to treat as a genuine characterization of a real dynamic. What changed this summer is that the dynamic became visible. The curtsy allegation reported by Pelham Turner represents the first time that William and Catherine's attitude toward Camilla has been described as producing a physical, public, observable gesture, something that went beyond the private atmosphere of difficult family dinners, and became, in at least one royal observer's account, a moment Charles interpreted as a challenge he would answer. His answer was Highgrove. On July the 10th, Charles arranged a private reunion with Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet at his Gloucestershire estate, the first time he had seen his youngest son's children in 4 years. Vanity Fair's Katie Nicholl reported, drawing on sources close to Charles, that not even William and Catherine were told the meeting was happening. A source inside Charles's own circle used the words, "completely cloak and dagger orchestrated by the king." Camilla joined partway through, summoned by Charles from her nearby Ray Mill house, while the meeting was already underway, a witness in the framing of one royal commentator to whatever was decided in that room. While all of this was happening in Gloucestershire, William was 90 miles away in Windsor at the DMI Royal Charity Polo Cup, doing his public duties and knowing nothing about it. Royal broadcaster Helena Chard described the meaning of what Charles did next. The Buckingham Palace room offer extended to Harry for his expected September return, with the precision that the situation demands. It was, she said, a major sign of defiance to William's wishes of no future relationship. She noted that Charles went out of his way to accommodate Harry and his family during the July visit, and that this gesture of goodwill did not sit well with William and Kate, contributing to the frosty standoff with Camilla that produced the curtsy allegation in the first place. What we are watching is a feedback loop with a very specific engine. The engine is not Harry. It is not the Sandringham Agreement, or the Invictus Games, or the question of Buckingham Palace rooms. The engine at its core is Diana's shadow, and what it has done to the relationship between a man who loves his wife and a son who has never fully forgiven the woman his father chose. To understand how deep that shadow runs, consider what Camilla has carried since the memoir was published. In Spare Harry described her in terms that were specific, personal, and damaging. He wrote that she had briefed against him and Meghan in the press. He alleged that her path to public acceptance had been smoothed at the expense of Diana's reputation. He named her in ways that a palace could not simply absorb and move on from. The institution closed ranks around her publicly. Charles said nothing that acknowledged the specific allegations. But privately, according to multiple reports, the memoir deepened a division that was already structural, between the people inside the palace, who believe Camilla deserves full institutional protection, and those who believe the price of her rehabilitation has been paid by others. William is understood to sit in neither camp cleanly. He is not Harry. He did not publish his feelings or give interviews describing his grief and his resentment. But he has not, by any credible account, made peace with what his father's marriage to Camilla meant for his mother's memory or for his own childhood. And now, as he approaches the throne with increasing visibility and institutional weight, the question of what place Camilla will occupy in his reign has become one that Charles cannot avoid asking, and that the curtsy allegation and everything that followed it suggests he has now decided to answer publicly. The answer is, he will stand by her. He will open the doors she wants open. He will invite Harry back because Harry's presence sends a message to William that Charles is still the king, that his choices still govern, and that the woman William walked past without acknowledging is not someone Charles will allow to be diminished. Royal commentator Ian Pelham Turner made Charles's position explicit. He said Charles went out of his way to bring Harry back to royal soil, described it as his first sign of public defiance, and added that Charles was furious with William and Catherine over the Camilla incident. He is not describing a grieving grandfather seeking connection with his grandchildren. He is describing a husband who has drawn a line and is using every tool available to him, his title, his authority, his position as the person who still controls Buckingham Palace, to defend the woman behind it. Camilla, for her part, is reportedly not a passive presence in this dynamic. Pelham Turner reported that she has been urging Charles not to listen to William on the question of Harry's return. A king who is already disposed toward reconciliation with Harry is being actively encouraged in that direction by the wife his heir has shown signs of marginalizing. The alignment between Camilla's reported interest in reducing William's institutional dominance and Charles's emotional desire to see Harry again is not coincidental. It is the specific intersection where personal loyalty and family politics become impossible to separate. And William knows this. According to one source cited by the Examiner, he is furious. Furious not only about the Harry meetings, but about what he perceives as Camilla's role in shaping his father's decisions in ways that serve her own position rather than Charles's well-being. A source told the outlet that William believes Camilla is more focused on protecting her future than on protecting Charles himself. That is a serious allegation that the Queen is using the Harry reconciliation as a mechanism to bind Charles's loyalty and reduce William's influence, and it should be understood as reported commentary rather than established fact. But it illuminates the emotional temperature inside the palace with a specificity that more guarded reporting tends to obscure. What has emerged this summer across the curtsy allegation and the Highgrove meeting and the Buckingham Palace offer is something that multiple royal observers have described using different language but arriving at the same essential point. Richard Fitzwilliams warned that the most disastrous thing that could happen to the monarchy would be a falling out between Charles and William. A Heat-World royal watcher called Charles's decision to welcome Harry back a massive humiliation for William and a gigantic political gamble for the king. Kinsey Schofield observed that Charles can afford emotional decisions that William as the next king cannot. And Helena Chard noted that Charles is reigning while William and Catherine are planning, and that their planning is starting to look like leading. Put all of those observations together, and a single picture forms. Charles is making choices in the present that William will be left to manage in the future. He is protecting Camilla by demonstrating that her position is secure while he is king. He is welcoming Harry by demonstrating that the doors he opens are not William's to close while Charles is alive. He is doing both of these things simultaneously, protecting his wife and reconciling with his younger son in ways that happen to produce the same institutional consequence: a reduction of William's effective authority over the shape of the family he will one day lead. September will be the next chapter. Harry is expected to return for the Wellchild Awards, the annual charity ceremony he has attended as patron for 15 years. According to The Sun, Charles is again offering Harry accommodation at Buckingham Palace, a renewed invitation following the disputed collapse of the July offer, when conflicting accounts from Harry's team and palace officials turned what should have been a private family arrangement into a public disagreement. This time, insiders say Harry is expected to accept well in advance, providing palace staff and protection officers the full 28 days of notice required to make arrangements work. If Harry walks into Buckingham Palace in September with his father's blessing, the image carries a meaning that no careful palace statement can contain. It is the working center of the British monarchy, the building William is preparing to take over. A building where if Harry sleeps, his presence communicates something about who belongs and who decides questions that Charles is currently answering in ways William has not endorsed and was not asked to approve. And Catherine is absorbing the cost of a conflict she did not begin and cannot resolve. She is the future queen. She is the person who will one day stand beside William through everything the palace has accumulated and is still accumulating. She is by all accounts aligned with her husband's position. And she is, according to the curtsy allegation, the person through whom the tension between the Waleses and Camilla became visible in a way that Charles chose to answer at the level of the institution rather than the level of the family. That is the measure of where this has arrived. A curtsy not given became a meeting not disclosed, which became a room at Buckingham Palace being prepared for the man William has been trying to keep at a distance for years. Charles chose Camilla. He chose her by choosing Harry. He chose her by keeping William in the dark. He chose her by making visible through the architecture of his private decisions that the woman his heir walked past without acknowledging is the woman the king is prepared to defend with every tool his reign still gives him. Diana's shadow has always been the third presence in this family. in Camilla's marriage to Charles, in William's complicated relationship with his stepmother, in Harry's memoir and the specific pages that named her, in the institutional question of what Camilla's position will be when Charles is no longer alive to protect it. That shadow did not create this summer's conflict. But it runs underneath all of it, through the curtsy allegation, through Charles's fury, through William's contained rage, through Camilla's reported influence on the question of Harry's return, and through the doors that are being opened at Highgrove and Buckingham Palace against the wishes of the man who will one day own both buildings. Charles is still the king. His authority is real. His decisions carry institutional weight that William cannot override while Charles lives. But William is the future, and he is watching his father spend that authority on choices that serve the woman William resents, and the brother William has distanced, and doing so in at least one reported reading in direct response to a curtsy that was not offered in a corridor. When Charles is gone, the doors will belong to William. Camilla's position will belong to William's definition of it. The question of Harry's access will belong to William's answer. Everything Charles is building now, the Highgrove reunion, the Buckingham Palace invitation, the communications summit conducted without Kensington Palace's involvement, will become part of the inheritance William receives along with the throne. Charles knows this. He is choosing Camilla anyway. He is opening the doors anyway. He is making the decisions anyway, with the urgency of a man who understands that the time left to make them is not infinite. The palace is reeling because a king is spending his remaining authority not on the smooth management of his succession, but on the protection of the people he loves most, and because the man who will inherit the consequences of those decisions is watching it happen from 90 miles away in Windsor at a polo match with no curtsy given and no answer offered. September is coming. The room at Buckingham Palace is being prepared, and the question of what William does with everything Charles leaves behind him, including the woman Charles chose over his heir's objections, is the question this story has always been building toward. To fully understand why Charles is making these choices now in this manner, with this degree of secrecy and this degree of consequence for his relationship with William, you have to understand what cancer does to the calculus of a king. Charles was diagnosed in February 2024. The specific form of cancer was never disclosed by Buckingham Palace, though his treatment for prostate issues, which led to the discovery, was confirmed. His treatment schedule reduced in January 2026, leading some observers to interpret that reduction as a sign of progress. But no official declaration of remission has been made. The palace describes his condition in language that is careful, controlled, and consistently short of reassurance. He attends public engagements. He appeared visibly well at the May Highland Games in August, sipping whiskey in his kilt, before a crowd of 2,000 people in Caithness. His YouGov approval rating hit a record high of 68% in recent weeks. And yet a man with an undisclosed cancer, who has been managing it for more than 2 years, is also a man doing a specific kind of arithmetic. He is calculating what conversations he still has the opportunity to have, what relationships he can still repair, what protections he can still put in place, and who, when the decisions are no longer his to make, will bear the weight of the ones he chose not to make while he had the chance. Camilla sits at the center of that arithmetic. She is his wife. She is 77 years old. She has spent decades inside an institution that was not always kind to her, managing a public rehabilitation that required the suppression of almost everything personal in favor of a relentlessly controlled, duty-oriented public persona. She has done it without complaint visible to the outside world. She has absorbed Harry's memoir without a public response. She has continued appearing at engagements, opening libraries, and supporting charities, conducting herself with the composure the role requires. And Charles, who knows better than anyone what the institutional machine costs the people inside it, is watching her do it, while also watching his heir make small, documented, consequential decisions, that signal what Camilla's future will look like when the machine belongs to William. The Annabel Elliot decision was the clearest of those signals. Elliot had been on the Duchy of Cornwall payroll since 2005, the year Charles married Camilla. She had earned, according to the Telegraph, several £100,000 over nearly 2 decades of work on royal properties across England and Scotland. When William inherited the duchy in 2022 and exercised his authority as Duke of Cornwall for the first time in any substantive way, one of the things that changed was Elliot's employment. No drama, no announcement. Simply an absence in the duchy's annual accounts where her payments had previously appeared. Royal sources went out of their way to insist there was no bad blood. Her work was described as complete. Staff had learned from her. It was framed as a transition rather than a dismissal. But the message that reached Camilla's circle, and that reached Charles according to reporting, was not about interior design. It was about who would remain in the room when William controlled the room. William is already showing a ruthless streak, one insider told Radar Online. It's no wonder Charles worries he's unlikely to find a place for Camilla. That is not a remark about a contractor's employment status. It is a remark about a queen's future security inside an institution her husband has spent his reign trying to ensure will protect her. And it is the specific fear that, according to multiple royal sources, Charles has been carrying alongside his cancer diagnosis, the fear that what he has built for Camilla, what he has negotiated and advocated and publicly defended across decades, will begin to dissolve the moment his authority ends. He has reportedly told her she will be looked after. Radar Online reported that Charles has given Camilla private assurances about her place within the royal household after his death. Whether those assurances translate into formal arrangements that William would be obligated to honor is a legal and constitutional question that the palace has not publicly addressed. What is clear is that Charles's confidence in those assurances rests partly on his belief that he can influence William's disposition toward Camilla while he is still alive. And it is that belief, the belief that the choices he makes now can shape the inheritance he leaves, that explains everything happening this summer. By welcoming Harry back, Charles is doing something for Camilla that cannot be accomplished through direct conversation. He is demonstrating that William does not yet control the institution. He is showing that the doors of the palace remain for now the king's doors to open, not the heir's doors to keep shut. He is exercising visibly and deliberately the authority that will eventually pass to William as a reminder that it has not passed yet. And in doing so, he is communicating to Camilla through action, rather than words, that she is not yet at the mercy of the son who walked past her without curtsying. Whether that communication is landing in the way Charles intends is harder to assess. Camilla's internal response to the Highgrove meeting, to the curtsy allegation, to the summer's accumulation of palace friction, has not been reported in any detail by outlets with reliable access to her circle. She has continued appearing at public engagements with the same controlled composure she has always presented. She has said nothing that indicates how she is absorbing the reported tensions between her husband and his heir. What has been reported is her influence, the claim from Pelham Turner that she is urging Charles not to listen to William on the question of Harry's return. If accurate, that places her not as a passive recipient of Charles's protection, but as an active participant in the choices he is making, someone who understands the stakes clearly enough to weigh in on them. And that dimension is what makes the title of this video, King Charles Chooses Camilla Over William, precise, rather than merely dramatic. Because the choice is not incidental. It is not a side effect of Charles's desire to see his grandchildren. It is a deliberate act reportedly driven in part by Camilla's own positioning that signals to William, to the institution, and to anyone watching closely, that the current king's loyalty to his wife has not diminished with illness, has not been moderated by the political complexity of his heir's objections, and will not be adjusted to accommodate the preferences of the man who will one day inherit everything. There is one more dimension to this that has received less attention than it deserves: the role of Tom Sykes, host of the Royalist podcast, in articulating something that friends of William have reportedly said privately about the intersection of the family's health crises and the Sussex estrangement. In an April 2026 episode of the podcast, Sykes made an assertion that sparked significant coverage. Friends and people around William, he said, believed that Catherine's cancer was at the very least made worse, or the whole situation aggravated by the stress around Harry. He added that Camilla holds a similar view about Charles and Harry's relationship. That claim is significant in multiple directions. If people close to William genuinely believe that Harry's actions contributed to Catherine's illness, the depth of William's position becomes easier to understand. It is not only institutional. It is not only about the Sandringham Agreement, or the rival court, or the precedents being set for his future reign. It is personal, in a way that makes the clinical language of royal observers feel inadequate. A man who believes that his wife's cancer was worsened by the stress his brother created is not going to soften toward that brother because his father arranged a secret meeting in Gloucestershire. He is going to hold his position with something harder than political conviction. He is going to hold it with grief. And Charles, if he is aware of this, if he understands that William's fury is not merely institutional, but genuinely personal, in ways that go beyond Camilla, and the Sandringham Agreement is making the choice to proceed with the Harry reconciliation anyway. Which tells you something very specific about where Charles's priorities lie in the time he has left. He is not optimizing for William's cooperation. He is not managing toward a smooth succession. He is trying to repair what can be repaired with Harry, for Camilla's security for the grandchildren he had not seen in 4 years, while he still has the authority to try. Richard Fitzwilliams said the most disastrous thing that could happen to the monarchy would be a falling out between Charles and William. He is right. But the falling out that would be most disastrous is not the kind that produces public statements or formal breaks. It is the kind that accumulates through cloak and dagger meetings and curtsy allegations and rooms at Buckingham Palace offered against an heir's objections, the kind that fills the gap between two men who love the same institution and disagree entirely about what protecting it requires. That gap is not closing. It may be widening. And the woman at its center, the wife, the king, is defending the stepmother. The heir has signaled his intentions toward the Queen, who has urged Charles not to listen to William's advice, is watching all of it from inside the palace that her husband is still running. For now, Charles has chosen Camilla. He has chosen her through Harry, through Highgrove, through Buckingham Palace invitations, through the management of a family conflict he is driving from the position of a man with limited time and clear priorities. The palace is still absorbing what those priorities mean. William is still holding his position. September is still approaching. And the question that no one inside those walls has yet answered, the question of what happens to Camilla's place inside the institution when the man protecting it is no longer alive to protect it, is the question that will outlast this summer's conflict and define the first years of whatever comes next. The broader institutional consequence of what Charles is doing deserves one final examination, because it connects every individual decision of this summer into a single strategic picture that most coverage has been too focused on individual moments to see clearly. Charles is not only choosing Camilla in the emotional sense, he is choosing her in the structural sense, by using the remaining time of his reign to establish facts on the ground that will be harder for William to reverse than if they had never been established at all. Every time Harry visits Highgrove with Charles's arrangement, the precedent of Harry visiting Highgrove exists. Every time Harry is offered Buckingham Palace accommodation, the precedent of that offer exists, regardless of whether it is accepted. Every time Charles's communications office meets with Harry's team in a private London club without Kensington Palace's involvement, the precedent of that back channel exists. These precedents are not legally binding on William. He will be king. He will be able to make different decisions. But precedents create political costs for reversing them. A future king who closes doors that his father publicly opened becomes the story, not the man who opened them, not the man who walked through them, but the man who locked them afterward. Charles, whether consciously or not, is making William's future management of the Harry question more expensive by normalizing Harry's access while Charles is alive. This is what Mark Dolan meant when he warned about a rival court being established in defiance of the late Queen's Sandringham framework. It is not that Harry is formally claiming any institutional status. It is that the access he is accumulating to private estates to the King's communication channels to Buckingham Palace accommodation functions as an informal institutional presence that is increasingly difficult to dismiss as nothing. Harry in a room at Buckingham Palace is not Harry on the working staff list. But he is also not Harry in California at arm's length from the institution. He is somewhere in between. And the precise location of that somewhere is being defined right now this summer by Charles, not by William, not by the Sandringham Agreement, not by the institutional machinery that Elizabeth built and that William was depending on to hold. William cannot stop this in real time. He can only hold his own position visible enough that when the throne passes to him, no one inside or outside the palace is in any doubt about where he stands. That is what the Hastings fishing visit is about. That is what the Commonwealth Games appearance with all 3 children in Glasgow is about. That is what the total silence from Kensington Palace in the weeks since Highgrove is about. William is building a record. He is constructing a public image of steady, consistent, institution-first leadership that will become the reference point against which everything else is measured when the succession happens. But he cannot build that record without absorbing the cost of what Charles is doing simultaneously. He cannot project institutional stability from Kensington Palace while Buckingham Palace is being opened to his estranged brother at his father's direction. He cannot present a clean, coherent vision of the monarchy's future while the current monarch is making decisions that complicate it at every turn. The 2 images exist side by side, both real, both authoritative within their own sphere, and the tension between them is visible enough that multiple royal commentators are now describing it in the language of palace division rather than family tension. Catherine's position in all of this is worth returning to because she has been one of the least reported dimensions of a story that is very much also hers. She is the future queen. She is the person who spent months of 2024 managing a cancer diagnosis with a level of grace and discretion that generated genuine public admiration and drove Charles's approval numbers upward on the back of sympathy for the Wales family as a whole. She is the person whose presence beside William at every difficult public moment has been described repeatedly as one of the most stabilizing forces in the current monarchy's public image. She is also, according to the curtsy allegation and the reporting around it, the person through whom the conflict between the Waleses and Camilla became visible enough to produce consequences. If the curtsy incident happened as Pelham Turner described it, if William and Catherine walked past Camilla without acknowledging her in a way that was read inside the palace as a deliberate signal, then Catherine was part of that signal. She and William made the same choice in the same corridor. And Charles's response to that choice is the chain of events that has produced the Highgrove meeting the Buckingham Palace offer and the summer's entire accumulation of palace friction. That is a significant observation, because Catherine is not simply William's supportive spouse in this story. She is a principal. She has skin in the question of Camilla's position. She has her own reasons, not necessarily the same as William's, not necessarily rooted in Diana's memory in the way William's are, but real and present for the relationship with Camilla to be whatever it reportedly is. And she and William appear to have decided together to make that relationship visible rather than managed. Whether that decision proves wise, whether it accelerates or complicates the trajectory of a conflict, that would have played out in any case, is something that only the months ahead can answer. What September tells us will matter. Whether Harry arrives at Buckingham Palace, whether Charles stands beside him at the Well-Child Awards, whether any contact between the brothers occurs or continues to be conspicuously absent, whether the curtsy allegation produces any visible change in how the Waleses and Camilla appear together in public, all of it will add to the picture that this summer has begun to draw. But the picture's outline is already clear. A king with cancer has looked at the time he has left and decided how to spend it. He has decided to protect his wife by demonstrating his loyalty to her through the choices that carry the most institutional weight, the choices that his heir objects to most strongly, that send the clearest message about whose authority still governs, and that establish the most durable precedents for the access and position that Camilla will need when Charles is no longer there to secure them. He has chosen Camilla. The palace knows it, William knows it, and the summer of 2026 will be remembered as the moment the choice became impossible to misread.